Well, as you're aware, I'm going to speak in English. I hope that won't be a problem. Okay now? Oh, okay. Thanks so much for inviting me here and giving me this opportunity to present to you the point of view, the radical point of view about what's happening in the Middle East and North Africa and also Iran. Watching this short film, there were two sentences in that film that I cannot not make a comment about and go. In the beginning, the commentator, the narrator on the film says, whatever Osanlu did was not against the government. Nevertheless, he's in prison. And at the end, the was it Indonesian transport union leader said, we're unionists, we have nothing to do with politics. These two sentences put together give you a very, very illusionary image of what's going on. If you're fighting for the improvement of the conditions of the workers under the Islamic regime, and then call that is not against the regime, then you either don't know what the regime is, you either don't know what the Islamic regime stands for, or you don't know anything about the workers, or you're just trying to avoid the police. I can't think it of any other way. How many workers, activists have been tortured, imprisoned, and killed over the 30-something years that this regime has been in power? I don't have the exact numbers. What they have all been doing? Fighting for the improvement of the workers. But when you have a dictatorship, a suppressive regime, which actually protects a capitalist system which is based on the harshest working condition and harshest rate of exploitation, then anything you do to improve the workers' conditions is political. Then anything you do just to improve, just to raise 10 crowns for the minimum wage is against the regime and is against the government and is political. That's one of the problems that's wrong with this movement. Unfortunately, with all respects to Mansour Osanlu and all the other trade unionists who are in jail in Iran and who are in jail in many other places, in Egypt, in Tunisia, this is the problem. Thinking that you can improve the conditions of the workers in these countries, or any country for that matter, and say, I have nothing to do with politics, it's not political, then there's something wrong. Either you don't know what you're doing, or you think you can fool others. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. Just like just like women's activists do in Iran. They're trying to improve women's conditions. They're trying to make reforms in the conditions of women, and they say, we're not political. We're not political. It has nothing against the Islamic regime. The Islamic regime's constitution says that. Come on now. Are you fooling me? Are you fooling the regime? Or are you fooling yourself? The regime knows what you want. I know you can't get anywhere like that. To improve even 1 centimeter of the women's conditions in Iran, you have to topple that regime. And that's as political as it can be. To the bone of it is political. This is the fact that we have to see, not only about Iran. Nowadays, with the capitalist crisis, that more and more people are being unemployed, are pushed into poverty, are being discriminated against, you cannot avoid politics or think you're avoiding politics and fight for improvement or reforms. You're not avoiding politics, you're just playing in the hands of the politics of the people who are ruling you. That's what it is. This is the reformist, unionist politics, which is actually playing in the hands of whoever is your ruling class. And this is the fact that we should really look into the eyes and see. as far as Islamic regime is concerned, for any improvement of the conditions of the people, be it workers, be it women, be it youth, be it anything, just to be able to have half of the freedom of speech you have here in Sweden, you need to topple that regime. Joran mentioned the two brothers who were executed on Tuesday. When I saw their mother, I really couldn't do anything. I still can't. I still have a headache from looking at that mother, being a mother myself, having lost two sons in one day. But then they had a very crowded procession yesterday, I think, or the day before, I'm not quite sure, on the streets of Isfahan to the cemetery. And the mother was wonderful, wonderfully brave, talking against the regime. She knows that if you want to change anything in that country, you have to get rid of that whole system, and that goes for the Middle East. Joran talked about the trade union activists in Iran who are in jail, about the condition in Iran, so that made my work easier. I can move on and go to the Middle East and North Africa. What has been known as the Arab Spring. Now, the media talk of what's happened in the Middle East and North Africa as the Arab Spring. 6 months of protests from one country to another, like a domino effect. No one could imagine that would happen. No one. It took everyone by surprise. It took Obama by surprise. It took Mubarak by surprise. It took all of us who defend freedom and equality by surprise. It broke many stereotypes about that part of the world. Especially in the West, people thought of that region, some fundamentalists who think about Islam and nothing else. So when they came to the streets, many people thought, now they're going to say, Islamic regime. No. People said freedom. People said justice. People said no to corruption. People said no to discrimination. And that broke the stereotype that's been hanging over that region, or was hanging over that region, a stereotype that was built for us by the media and by the ruling classes in the West, so they can have their own dealings with the sheikhs. And we think, okay, this is how people are. They like to be stoned. You know, women, they like to be stoned. Women, they like to be treated like animals. This is their culture. Cultural relativism. They have a very, very beautiful name for it too. It's a very fancy name. You know, me or Roxana who's sitting there, or we love to be stoned and killed and tortured and bewailed. You know, it's our culture. Somehow they've given us something and called culture, and then they can do whatever they want to us. And people here could just walk around and think, well, that's their culture. See, all these things that you see is part of the ideology of the ruling classes. They all have their functions, and they work. They work until someone comes and breaks it and demystifies it and says, no, listen, this is not the case. For me, the best picture that gives the essence of the movement in the Middle East and North Africa is the first picture came out in Tunisia. I'm sure you all have seen. It's been all over the internet and media. A crowd, a man with a baguette, French baguette, the bread in his hand. You remember? It was after that unemployed worker, his name I forgot, Abu Aziz. He burnt himself. He put fire to him because of, as a protest to humiliation, protest to poverty, exploitation, suppression, oppression, discrimination. He was a symbol. He was a symbol, and that symbol worked as a match and fired the whole Middle East and North Africa. And that picture with the bread That's what has stuck in my mind, and I think many other people's. In many ways, it says what these movements in the Middle East and North Africa are about. They don't want Islamic regime. This is something they first told us they might want Islamic regime. They want freedom. They want equality. They want prosperity. They want justice. And they want to do it themselves. But why? Why all of a sudden it started in one of these countries and just went all over those countries? First Tunisia, Algeria was immediately after, and it's still going on, but not as openly as other parts. Then Egypt, Bahrain, Libya, Yemen, Syria, Jordan. Now we have to wait for the list. Even Saudi Arabia decided to make some reforms from the fear of this socio-political earthquake that was shaking the whole region. People came wanting to take things in their own hands, take matters in their own hands, rule over themselves, and get rid of this whole system of oppression, exploitation, that creates nothing but poverty, nothing but discrimination, nothing but oppression. And many people are discussing it. If you turn on the TV, all the time there are discussions about the Arab Springs, what happened, what do they want, what's going to happen. Well, the basis of it, I think, is the capitalist crisis that we are witnessing globally. That's the main reason behind this movement, this general movement, this regional movement that has brought people to the streets. The level of inequality in these countries are incredible. We hear about the wealth of Mubarak and his family, Ben Ali, Zain al-Abidin Ben Ali and his family, Gaddafi and his family, Saleh and his family, Assad and his family. The amount of wealth accumulated by these states and the ruling classes, and amount of poverty that's created among the people. This contrast is unbelievable, and as the crisis created poverty and disruption in the whole region, even in the West, those areas were the ones that were affected by this crisis. This is the basis of it. On the top of all these years of corruption, all these years of dictatorship, all these years of oppression, lack of freedom of speech, lack of freedom of movement, lack of freedom of association, freedom of organization. For example, in none of these countries you can have a communist party. It's banned, as though it's written, in the, well, it is written in the God's word. What am I saying? It's just so natural in these countries that if you're a communist, if you're a left activist, if you're a trade unionist, you must be banned. Your activities are banned. This is the picture that you have, and this is the real picture you have in the Middle East and North Africa, and then added to that misery and poverty and suppression came the capitalist crisis, more poverty and harsher rate of exploitation. They talk just after Tunisia started, before Ben Ali was taken away. They were all talking about Tunisia as a model of paradise of capitalism, with a good rate of development and progress, and a country that it was a paradise for all the capitalists, international capitalists, to go there and invest. Well, the rate of unemployment was very high, but still it was a paradise, as the World Bank, I think, was it European Economic Forum called it. And very shortly after that report from the European Economic Forum, we witnessed the demonstrations. And then Egypt after that, and all those other countries. But what is at stake here? Well, in Tunisia, you had Ben Ali taken away after 2 weeks. And then the same old guys stayed in power. The prime minister, all the ministers, the army, nothing changed. Just Ben Ali and his wife, who's very despised, with tons of central bank's gold. As though it's her own gold, she went to the central bank, took all the gold, put it in her suitcase, and left. Stayed in place. Demonstrations continue, protests continued. One day they took one minister, and then they continued, and it still goes on. Actually, last week in London there was a protest against killing of a young left trade unionist in Tunisia by police. There was a demonstration, and the police shot this young man who was both a left activist and a trade unionist. So it's going on, but it's not in the focus of the news anymore. They're trying to somehow quell the whole thing, just get rid of the top man and keep the whole system. That's the whole purpose. That's what the so-called native bourgeoisie, the ruling class, wants, and it's also what the West, the US, if you want to call it imperialists, I call it the slave terrorists, what they want. They want to keep that situation as untouched as possible. They take their top guy, but they keep the system. They tried to do the same thing in Iran in 1979. And then went to Egypt. In Egypt, they had problem. Mubarak didn't want to go, and there was these negotiations behind the doors. Tell Mubarak to go. As soon as the workers staged a strike, a national strike, the next day the army took Mubarak. Until the workers did not come as a class into the scene, they were playing this cat and mouse. But once the workers staged a general strike, Mubarak left and the army took over, and you know what one of the first declaration was? No strike. Strikes are banned. And they still do it. They were still giving another one, and they still, nothing has changed. And everyone knows the Egyptian army is a child of US. It's always been. So they tried there to take Mubarak out and keep the system, and they're still trying to do that. And they're even ready to compromise with a bit milder case of Islamists just to keep the system untouched. When I say system, I mean the same capitalist system with the same rate of exploitation. They're even ready, they even negotiate with the Islamist party in Egypt. Now they're talking about the Islamist party in Tunisia is also in place to take some power. And believe me, it's not because people want them. One of the things that actually was very eye-opening for people who did not know the area so well was you heard no slogan of defending Islam. There was no Islamist slogans in any of these demonstrations, in Al Tahrir, in Qahire, or in Tunisia. Even in Yemen, where women come all covered black, some with burqa, you don't hear Islamist slogans. But what is happening, the plan, the strategy of the West, NATO, US and state terrorism is to try to make a compromise between the mild Islamists, between the other section, and keep the system. Not let the matters go too far or get too deep. That's why as soon as the workers stage a strike, they take the top guy and say a strike is banned. Why is a strike banned? Isn't it one of the basic rights, a societal right, a civil right, a human right, to be able to strike? But the first thing these armies do when they take over is they ban the strikes. And this is what's been happening in this region. You see, I have to go maybe a bit deeper, a bit back to just give a picture of the region. See, in the Middle East and North Africa, where Islam keeps people downtrodden, Islamic-ridden countries, on the rule of Islam. I don't call them Muslim countries or Islamic countries. No, I don't. Because giving them this tag is making them that. People might be Muslims, but you don't call them Islamic countries. Do you call Sweden a Christian country? Majority think they're Christian or are believed to be Christians. Same thing there. Majority of people are Muslim. There are some people who have no religion. There are some people who are atheists. There are some people who are Christian. There are some people who are Jewish. Calling them Islamic countries or Muslim countries is to make that happen, to stamp them forever as a Muslim country, so you can easily veil the women, so you can easily stone the women and say it's their culture, so you can easily put people in jail and say they have done something against the God. I'm talking about countries where Islam has a very important role putting people down as part of their dominant ideology. In those countries, people are victims of two powers. One of them is Islamic terrorism or Islamic movement. The other one is state terrorism, led by the US. They're fighting against each other, especially since September 2011. They have turned the Middle East and North Africa into a battlefield under the so-called war on terror, which I call the war of terrorists. They fight, look what happened in Iraq, in Lebanon, in Afghanistan. All that region has become a big battlefield. Millions. In Iraq, according to some American statistics, 1 million people as a result of war have been killed over this since 2003. And then all over the place, and misplaced, and poverty, and indiscrimination, and sectarianism. Before that, Iraq was under a terrible dictatorship, I know. But a Shia man and a Sunni woman would marry. Or even a Christian and a Muslim. Well, with all the problems that created, they would still marry. But now they kill each other. They are forced to kill each other, not that they want to kill each other. I never forget that story I read. A woman said, who was supposed to be Shia, said, some of these Shia gangs came to my house and killed my husband for the crime of being a Sunni. This is what happened after the war. I'm not going to go into that. I just want to try to say what elements are in play there, what actors are playing. Middle East and North Africa Middle East has, for the whole, I think, period of 20th century, you could say, has been a place of some sort of battlefield. And then with the Palestinian question and Israel, and the whole insecurity, whole war going on. And now, after September 2001, this war of terrorists has also added. Look at Pakistan. What has happened? Pakistan has always had a dictatorship, a very sectarian government, but after what happened with the war of terrorists, people are just killed on the streets constantly, and they're ordinary people. These are the victims. So, people were victims of both, and they were forced to take sides. So if you were against America, if you were against imperialism, if you were against Israel, how you want to call it, how people internalize the problem, they would automatically turn towards the Islamists, as with this common proverb that enemy of my enemy is my friend. Just like that. So if you're anti-America, then you're pro-Islamist. And if you were anti-Islamist, then you were pro-America. It seemed like there was no way out, no third way. Even look at the lefts here in the West. Since they are anti-imperialist, they defend Ahmadinejad. I mean, it's just beyond my understanding how a person who calls himself left, meaning wants equality, wants women's rights, wants a better life for people, could defend Islamic regime. What on earth could something like that happen? Last week, 2 weeks ago, I was in France for a meeting in Paris. I said this very quickly just to give you a picture. I met an old friend from Spain. We started talking, and I knew, but he said it again, he said that he was Trotskyist. I said, yeah, I know. I respect Trotsky a lot, but I don't have much to do with Trotsky's movement. And then he started asking me about Islamic regime, and I said, well, you know, this is their balance sheet. How many people they've killed, what they do to women. He said, well, but I've heard from a Muslim feminist. As soon as he said that, I said, please, Michael, don't tell me you're pro-cultural relativism. He said, no, I was just saying that they do that, but they fight against imperialism. And I said, listen, okay, I agree, they fight against imperialism. Why do you disagree with imperialism? What's wrong with imperialism? To me, I'm against imperialism because I'm for equality, because I'm for freedom, because I'm for a society free of poverty, discrimination, oppression. I want a society that everyone is equal. I want a society that men, women are equal. I want a society that children live in prosperity and have a happy life. I want a free, happy, prosperous society. That's why I'm against imperialism. What's wrong with imperialism, to your opinion? He looked at me. I said, okay, if then I'm against imperialism for that reason, then how could I be for Ahmadinejad or Khamenei or Islamic regime? To hell with both of them. And then he kept trying to find some way out of this situation, but he didn't want to say it directly, that as a Trotskyist, he thought they were, anti-imperialist, so they were defendable somehow. This is the picture of a part of left in the West and also in the region. This is, for us, not only a political fight, but an ideological one as well. We have to demystify all these false ideologies, thinking that Islamic ideology has anything to do with liberation ideology, has anything to do that's positive for human being in it. And people in the region are more than anyone else victims of that. But what was very amazing and interesting, and for me was really, really exciting, was when the people took to the streets. They did not side with any one of those. They did not shout Islam or Islamic Republic or Islamic regime or Islamic law or none of that. And they did not even shout death to America. What they shouted was freedom. You've seen freedom in Arabic and English. In Tahrir Square in Cairo, in Tunisia, in Yemen, in Bahrain, in Syria, everywhere, people say freedom, people say no to corruption, people say justice, people say no to discrimination. This is what they want. And I believe that was very important achievement, not only for the people there, but us, freedom-loving people, me as a communist, and also gave me a very good tool to fight against all this so-called left, who side with Islamic regime, who side with Gaddafi, who side with Assad in Syria, thinking that since they're fighting Obama, even if you look at Obama and Gaddafi, Obama hasn't killed anyone himself, has ordered to kill. Gaddafi has killed. He's a killer himself. I mean, if you look at those two, why do you defend Gaddafi vis-a-vis Obama? To hell with both of them. You don't need to defend any one of these two. This is something I think we have actually achieved in these 6 months of Arab Spring, if you like to call it. This is what people want. But no, what they are trying to do, they're trying to push down their throat a government, a unity government of the Islamists, the moderate ones. They only say to wear the veil if you like to. They won't stone you to death. This is the difference. And the previous regime, the previous ruling class, they want to put them together as a union, as a unity government, and push that down the throat of people. This is what we have to be careful. Now I want to get to something that's very controversial. I know as soon as I say that, everyone would look at me like that. Okay, people say freedom. I haven't heard in any of the demonstrations people say, we want democracy. People say we want freedom. But the leaders, so-called leaders, the self-appointed leaders, I don't even know what happened now to that guy who was from the atomic energy, the Egyptian guy who they brought to make him a leader. He failed somehow, Baradei. In the beginning, do you remember? Every day, Al Jazeera, BBC, CNN keep interviewing this guy as a leader. And some people said, who? I remember, I saw a film, some young people said, who said this is our leader? We don't even know him. They tried to make him a leader, didn't work. Now they're only them and the media say pro-democracy movement in the Arab. Why do I have anything against democracy? Democracy is much better than dictatorship. I agree. I agree. Even if they tell me tomorrow they would have some democracy like Sweden with all the problems that democracy in Sweden has, I'm not going to get into that. It's not the topic of my talk. I say, of course, it's so much better than having that dictatorship. But there are two problems. One, you would never have the democracy you have in Sweden, in Egypt. You know why? Because you have this democracy here in Sweden on the shoulders of the high rate of exploitation of the workers there. If they could, with that technology, produce and make profit as they do here, maybe it was possible to have democracy there. But it's not possible. They have to stone people. They have to jail people, even some mild trade unionists like Mansour Osanlu, in order to be able to make the profit they want. For the bourgeoisie, Mansour Hekmat has a very good saying. He said in one speech, he says, their bourgeoisie's respect for freedom and democracy is as thick as his wallet. Once he sees his wallet is getting smaller, he forgets all about democracy and freedom. Then you have what? Coup d'etat. Then you have again torture. This is the story of the whole world. Just put the Western Europe aside for part of the 20th century. Look at the whole world. They've had revolution after revolution. They have been killed. And every day they have more sophisticated tools for torture. Islamic regime is one of the most backward regimes as far as ideology and culture is concerned. They have the most sophisticated torture technology. They have the best cell phones now. They have whatever technology can offer in order to suppress, in order to kill, in order to torture, in order to shut people's mouths. You would not have, this is an illusion thinking you would have in Egypt, have capitalism, work, make cottons. They get $1 a day now. Then with $1 a day, who can live? Then the workers are going to strike, don't they? If you have democracy, then first thing would happen, workers would come to the street, strike, say we want better wages. And then you see the army in Tahrir Square again. you would not have the kind of democracy that you might wish to have in that region. And I think people more or less know that. That's why they say freedom. Maybe they haven't thought about it, but they know they want freedom. By freedom, they have this big vision to be able to live freely, to do what they want, to say what they want, to organize for what they want. Not to be put in jail as soon as they open their mouths. But the democracy there, the best one would be something like Turkey. And you've heard about the jails in Turkey, haven't you? You've seen even a film about it. The best you can get in that region would be Turkey. Democracy in that sense is illusional because capitalism cannot survive with that rate of technology, with the situation of the world, with the whole profit system, to give people any measure of freedom. And democracy is a system, political, ideological system compatible with capitalism. Whatever democracy you have in mind, I mean the best democracy, as Göran was telling me, the ultimate democracy, still is a system compatible with capitalism. So if you really want freedom, if you really want a decent life that people in Tahrir Square said they want, people in Yemen and Bahrain and Syria and Jordan and Tunisia, they say they want, that means a life that your child, doesn't matter, is born where, would have a good life, would have free and good education, you would have healthcare, free healthcare, even better than you have here now because they've cut so much here as well. And you can say what you want, you can organize for whatever you want. Women and men are equal. Doesn't matter whether you speak Kurdish or Turkish or Arabic or Farsi, whatever you speak, you're equal. If you want society like that, there is only one solution: socialism. And I'm not talking about Soviet Union, and I'm not talking about North Korea, and please don't throw that at me. It's been thrown at me so many times. I don't think Soviet Union was socialist. I don't think Cuba is socialist. I don't think Chavez is socialist. I don't think North Korea is socialist. I don't think China is socialist. I'm not talking about that socialism. I'm talking about socialism that we got from Communist Manifesto, from Capital, from Marx. That kind of socialism I'm talking about. Is illusion, I would be told immediately. But that's utopia, as I was told in Paris by my Trotskyist friend. When I told him that this is the socialism I want, he said that's utopia. And I want to say, to think that in Egypt you can have a society at the minute, if you really say, okay, like Sweden, that's more illusion. That's more illusion to think you can have a Swedish model in Egypt. Not that because people are culturally different and they don't understand, they don't like to have comfort, not that. Because this model in Western Europe and US, its history, its tradition, all of that has been in a different way, and it's been also on the shoulders of the harsh, brutal exploitation of the working class, other parts of the world, and dictatorship, other parts of the world. And, well, of course, now the high rate of technology and all of that. There's no time for me to get into that technicality. But believe me, it won't be possible to have that system there. And another thing I like to say, I know the Declaration of Human Rights is so much better than what's happening in all those countries. And we know the Declaration of Human Rights is not even practiced in US. Look at the jails in US, they torture people. And it's not even in UK. And now, even controlling your emails on the pretext of war against terror, as I understand, now in Sweden they officially can control your emails and check your emails. So you have no personal privacy anymore. The civil rights have been downtrodden so much in the West as well. So it's not even completely executed in Europe either. But there is one article in the Declaration of Human Rights that makes all the promise of equality nullified, and that's the right to private property. That's the most important article in that declaration. And I'm not talking about property of your house or car or clothes. I'm talking about private property of modes of production. That's capitalist system. That article is the most important article in that declaration. So as soon as you have that article, forget about the rest. You won't have the rest. They won't let you have the rest. You know why? Because as soon as you have some sort of freedom, like let's say the Declaration of Human Rights is practiced in Egypt or in Iran or in Jordan, then there are some communists like me want to organize, write newspapers, talk, make speech, have a meeting, just like we're doing. What we are doing is the threat to what? Private property. So the first thing they have to do, they have to defend the private property, so they put me in jail. Some people come and protest, why have you put Azar in jail? They put them in jail. Then the workers come and say, well, this is not the case. Then they put them in jail, and then that's it. And this Declaration of Human Rights has been a tool by the capitalist system in the Cold War era, an ideological tool against the so-called socialist or Soviet bloc then. They brought it so they can fight them, and they forgot about it. But now they're bringing it back again, but they know damn well that this is just an empty word, because there is one sentence in that nullifies the whole thing. The right to private property is respected and has to be protected. If the right to private property, and I mean mode of production, I'm talking about means of production. Means of production, that means capitalism has to be protected, then they go all the way to protect it. Then you have the story all over again. The film is back. They all play again. Orsanlu in jail, the other guy in jail, the communists, the first communists everywhere. First communists executed, hanged, killed, and then they go for the others. So this is the case. But that's why I say, people say we want freedom, we want equality, we don't want discrimination. They keep wanting to push down their throat, you want democracy. And they know what democracy system is there. They're going to have a parliament, an election every 4 years. Some of the same guys are going to be elected, they're going to bribe, they're going to have rigs, everything. And then that's the same system. You know, that's the main problem. If you really want to change, if you really want to have a society that respects freedom in the deepest sense of the word, the real essence of freedom, and if you want equality, not formal equality, which is good, but not formal, real equality, and real equality is only an equality, economic equality. If you don't have economic equality, you can't have real equality in the society. Real equality, and if you want really prosperity for all, doesn't matter where you're born, in which city you're born, what language your mother speaks, what religion she has or she doesn't have, what superstition she believes in or she doesn't believe in. All children are equal, regardless of gender, regardless of language, regardless of nationality, of their parents, because they just come into the world, they don't have no religion, no language, they just it's given to them. They're all equal. Then that's the only way you can do it, is by getting rid of private property, what the Declaration of Human Rights so vigorously defends. You cannot have freedom, real equality, and real prosperity for all citizens as long as capitalism lives. I don't have to say it. Look at what happened. Well, in the 70s or 80s, Sweden was much more prosperous as far as, I'm not talking in national production, I'm talking about the majority of people. I came to Scandinavia in 80s. The workers were much more well off, weren't they? You lived here. Look at it now. Just a month ago, there was this in the news, said out of every 4 children in London, 1 lives in real poverty. We're talking about London, not Cairo, not Tehran, not Islamabad. We're talking London. The heart of the finance world. You know how many banks they nationalized? And that means give money because they were going bankrupt. 25% of the children living in London live in absolute poverty. They have privatized university education in England. In order to go to university, you have to pay £9,000 fee. I can't afford it. There are many people poorer than me. Believe me, they can't afford it, even if they give you loan. They won't even think about borrowing so much money just to get a degree. They privilegized it and privatized it. And I'm talking about UK because I'm more familiar with the case. I'm sure you can give me many more about Sweden or about now Spain. They were going to ban the demonstration in Spain. See, the wallet, and they look at their wallet. In Spain, they were going to ban the demonstrations by people against the economic austerity. Would you believe it? They couldn't because people just rushed to the streets. But they said it's banned, but people came and broke the ban. In Greece, last week, the police killed 10 people protesting against austerity. When we look at Europe is like that, just imagine what would happen to the rest of the world. Well, I've probably gone all over global because you really can't. It was in the 70s Marshall McLuhan said the world is a big village. No, I mean, you can't talk about anything in just one little country. Everything has become so globalized, so internationalized, which is good. If we can, as well as the capitalists are not internationalized, the workers could become as internationalized and work together, it's very good. Then we can have the force of the whole international class, working class against them. Then we might get somewhere. But you can't really talk about the North Africa or Middle East and not talk about Europe, because what happened in the past few years, one more time brought to us the fact that under capitalism, you'll forever have discrimination, forever have poverty, and the distance between the rich and poor in the past decade has become much wider everywhere. The most rich people and the poorest, the gap has become so huge, even in US and Europe. So you can't really avoid spreading over. I'm going to finish my words with the Middle East and North Africa really bringing hope to us. I am still so excited, but at least in the first 2 months, I couldn't leave the TV set. I was just glued to the TV, looking at these people, looking at this bravery and solidarity. And I've experienced that in 1979 in Iran at the time of revolution.